And here we are in beautiful downtown Oakland yet again. And what is it? This is the 15th of Shaban in the year 1440 of the Hijra calendar, which is in the year of our Lord, April the 21st, 2019. Sometimes I like to use different calendars just because it's fun. So today we're going to talk about the concept of the conscious circle of humanity, which is one of the riffs that Gurdjieff called it. It's a concept that's been around for a while. The Sufis have talked about it for some centuries. Ibn al-Arabi was really into it. And religion got hold of it and made it a really interesting rigid structure, which I'm going to talk about first from a Sufic point of view, or just a theological point of view. And then I'm going to talk about it from a less rigid point of view. So they say that the world always has certain people in it. And I'm going to go from the highest to the lowest of these special people. The highest is called the Qutub. That's Q-U-T-B, also known as Al-Khwath. Qutub means the pole, as in the axis. And this is a person who, there is always one, according to the Sufi thought or religious thought. And this person does a couple of things. One is that they act as a step-down transformer, which is to say that there is all of this divine energy pouring into the world, and it enters the world through them. And then it is spread out like a body, going from the heart to the arteries, to the veins, to the capillaries, and nourishing the entire body. And the pole would be considered the heart. The second thing is that they are in some way a natural depository of knowledge and guidance. Now, the interesting thing is that nobody knows who this person is, including this person, most of the time. In rare occasions, they might receive a revelation that, oh, I am the pole of the age, the Qutub al-Zaman, the pole of this time. But mostly not. No need to. But but in this spiritual hierarchy, this would be the top dog. Can you say top dog when you're talking about Muslim stuff? So beneath, or in the service of the pole, are the Abdal. Now, when people hear this who are not Arab speakers, they think of like Abdullah or Abdul Qadir and that. And this is a completely different word. Abdal is, when it's in a name like Abdul Qadir, is two distinct words. This is one word, and it's a plural. And what it means, the singular of it is badal or badil. And it means those who are replaced. Now, most theological thought says that there are 40 of these guys. But when I say guys, I'm using the generic term because while the theologians assume that all of these people are men, those of us in the know that they can be equally male or female. And it makes no difference to God. So what this means is that these people are always present. And when one of them dies, they are immediately replaced. Hence the name, the replacements. And they are necessary to the existence of the universe. They keep the equilibrium of the world. And I think of them as the collective permanent eye of humanity. We'll get back to that in a moment, what that means. But there have been all sorts of theories about this, one of which is that most of them live in Syria. Let's hope not, because if that's the case, we are all in big trouble right now. But they also say that there is at least one in every continent. So there would be the Badil of Australia, the Badil of North America, the Badil of Europe, the Badil of Central Asia, and like that. And again, they don't know who they are, as a rule. If you notice them, it is because they are kind and gentle, and you feel good around them, and they tend towards being very decent human beings. But that could be anybody. But they are members of humanity who are consistently awake. And like I said, they act as the permanent eye of humanity. So underneath them, you have the people known as the akhyar, which means the noble people or the righteous. These are the keepers of the way. These are the ones who hold the teaching in trust. And then underneath that, you have the plural is evliya or awliya, depending on if you're speaking Arabic or Turkish or Persian. And that wali is the singular, and that means friend. These are the guardians, the ones who are entrusted with the work. I think of the wali as field agents. These are the ones who are sent out into the world to do work. And then underneath them are the flunkies, the henchmen, the minions. I have no term for them because people don't usually talk about them. So we'll stop at the friends, because the friends are the ones who work in the world. All of these individuals, according to Islamic thought, are very saintly, and they all say their prayers 5 times a day, and they all do this kind of, every little bit, and they're doing extra devotions all the time, and all like that. So here is the first question. Why would we need this arrangement? Of what possible value is it to the mass of humanity to have these few people floating around doing whatever it is that they're doing? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm very interested in your answers. Dave says, counterbalance the mechanical mass of humanity. To a certain extent, yes, but there's an even more important function. That is that consciousness can only be produced through consciousness. The analogy that I was given is bread. It takes a yeast to leaven the bread and make it rise. And I offered back, being as I used to live in Napa, California, that it was like wine because it takes the yeast to convert the sugars in wine to alcohol. And I got a dirty look for that. But the idea is that if these people were not here, the rest of us would not have the necessary catalyst to wake up. Therefore, the divine unity has decreed that the leavening for humanity will always exist. Does that make sense? I mean, you don't have to buy into it, but does it make sense? Does it follow a sort of logical thought? Good. I myself am pretty sure that this is absolutely accurate, though not necessarily in the way that the theologians would like us to think. I am completely convinced that it is necessary for every human being to be leavened, so that the process of awareness begins to devour the stuff of the ego in much the same way that yeast devours the sugars or starches in flour, or the sugars in grape juice, or the starches in beer, to produce something that is in a completely different order. And I know that in my experience, that's exactly what happens. This is what, for instance, a Sufi initiation is, or the Shaktipat of the truly awakened teachers in India, or the induction into the Sangha in Buddhism. All of these things. It is a transmission of an actual substance, for lack of a better term, that begins the process of awakening, unless it is strangled intentionally by the person who has received it, which happens more often than not. So, the whole point is that for human beings, for the inner human to evolve, it must be in the presence of consciousness to evolve its own consciousness. A conscious being needs to awaken human potential. And if it doesn't, the bread doesn't rise. Now, that being said, in my experience, and this is just my experience, the whole hierarchical nature of this that is described in theological thought, and it is adhered to by a number of dervish orders, is inaccurate. As a matter of fact, it is, in my opinion, more often than not, a way to subvert the process. So here's something that I will tell you for free. The Qutb will never claim to be the Qutb if he knows that he is, or if she knows that she is. And again, uh, gender is irrelevant. The Abdals will not claim to be that. If you walk up to one, if you were so lucky as to walk up to one and figure out that they were that, they would go, "What are you talking about? Get away from me." Well, wait a minute. You want to buy some radishes? I got radishes. So I will tell you that I had the privilege to meet one of the Abdals in my lifetime, and I'm going to tell you about that. This took place in a tiny little town on I-40 in Arizona. And I happened to be traveling through, going from Southern California, going along the route from I-40 goes through the Mojave Desert and all of that kind of stuff, and then starts going up into the Kaibab Plateau. And just where the plateau begins to start, there's this tiny little town whose name I'm not even going to tell you, even though this person is no longer there, because this was 1984? Yeah, around 1984. And this person was old then. So myself and my traveling partner decide that we're hungry. And we pull into this little one-horse town that is literally one street. It's like, here's the freeway that goes through, and there's one on-ramp and one off-ramp on either side of town, and one street that goes through it. And so we pulled off. And there was only one place to eat, and it was this fast food joint. And so we pulled in. And we walked up to order our food, and there was this little guy behind the counter. And I swear to God, he was the modern incarnation of Mullah Nasruddin. He was one joke and one trick after another. He was never in any moment serious, but he was completely deadpan. And after a little bit, I realized that he was pointing out our egos to us, because what he was doing was what Mr. Gurdjieff called stepping on corns, but he was doing it very, very gently and with great humor. And being around him was like feeling this glow. It was like standing next to a heater. And at the time, I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I was in the presence of a spiritual being. And so I came back to that place several times over the years. And it was always the same. I would go in, he would completely mess with my head in ways that I can't even begin to explain. And it was a strange place. You know, there's this Model T Ford sitting in front of it with a Christmas tree in the back of it. You know, it was one big Nasruddin joke. And I never said to him, "Hey, you're one of the Abdals," because he would have looked at me like I was crazy and probably pulled out a clown nose, stuck it on his face, and gone, "Ah." But I came to the conclusion that I was in the presence of that depth of being. And who knows, he may still be out there today. Who knows how long a person like that lives? But another person might not have ever found their way to that place. They might not have ever seen it. It's the kind of place that you could drive back past and never notice. And I would go there on my trips back and forth, because I'm from New Mexico, and to cross from California to New Mexico, you got to go through I-40 if you're going where I'm going. And so I would stop going out and coming back, and I would sometimes spend an hour and a half just sitting in the place watching his interactions. By the way, the food was terrible. The food was just abysmally bad. Not inedible, but it's like if you think of the worst kind of fast food you could get, it was that. And it was worth every penny. It was also interesting because he would do things like sometimes a person would come in and they would start counting out their nickels and dimes to pay for something, and he would refuse their money. Somebody is dinging me. Hang on for a second. Who is doing what to whom here? Oh, Nancy. Nancy should be joining us any second. For some reason, she couldn't find the link on the page or something. But we are happy to be having, there she is. Let that woman in. Ha ha. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
Glad you made it. We were missing you.
Hi, yeah, thanks.
Sure. Don't know what happened. I put the link up, but the thing to remember is that link that I sent you will always be the link.
Okay, yeah, there was nothing this week, so I don't know.
That's weird. I'll check later, make sure that it got put up.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm glad that you found this.
Yes, as a minor side effect, I ended up explaining about the group to my sister, so who knows? Something may come of that.
Yeah, maybe she'll show up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I should tell you that this person was not Arabic, not Persian, not Turkish, was either of Hispanic or mixed Hispanic and Native American attraction, and probably from some of the things in his place, at least ostensibly a Roman Catholic. So there is my story of meeting an Abdal. Do I know he was an Abdal? Inside, absolutely yes. Could I prove it? Absolutely not. Would I claim it to him? No, I'm not like, Ibn al-Arabi used to go around doing this. He would walk up to somebody and go, "Hey, fellow, do not reveal my station or I will reveal yours." You know, assuming that this person was some high spiritual muckety-muck, which may or may not be the case. But so, as far as I'm concerned, the people that we're talking about are real. The Qutub is real. The Abdal are real. The Akhyar are real. The Wali are real. But they don't look anything like the theologians would like them to look. They might look like a little old man behind a counter in a fast food joint in the middle of the high desert. They might be a little old lady pushing a cart down the street. You never know. And most of the time, they don't know either. So, Mr. Bennett used to talk about what I refer to as the hard and the soft theory of enlightened masters. The hard theory, or the strong theory, I think he called it the strong theory, the strong and the weak theory. The strong theory is that there are these incredibly enlightened beings that secretly control the world, and they have great powers and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, they're hidden away, but they control everything. I personally think that that's a good bedtime story. But it is not necessarily the truth. I tend to adhere to the weak theory of masters, which is there are people who have deep, profound understanding, and they do good in the world, but they are not all powerful. They are not somehow exempt from the rules that the rest of us follow, but they are able to teach, or they are able to do. Because not all of these people are teachers. The teachers tend to be in the lower two ranks. The friends are most of the teachers that you will find. And there's, like I said, there's a rank below that they're I think of them as the minions, the flunkies, the nobodies. Those of us who chop wood and carry water for our betters. But yeah, so I tend to go with the weak theory of mastership, that there are people who have developed their eye, but and interestingly, according to the oldest sources, the people that I have mentioned here, the stations that I have mentioned, except for the pole of the age, do not have spiritual powers. They have what we call karamat, which are charismatic powers. So they are able to do things like capture your attention. They are able to move you with their words. They are able to find the poetry in your soul and reflect it to you. But they are not going to make the sun go backwards in the sky or raise the dead or do any of that kind of stuff. They do not mess with the laws of physics. And this is true of everything, every group that I have mentioned. They do not get to mess with the laws of physics. They do not perform miracles. So, any questions so far? I'm waiting for a question. There must be a question somewhere. God, where's Ilmar when I need him? Well, I actually know where Ilmar is, and he's probably having more fun than we are. Dave, help me out. Give me a question.
Alrighty, so in some of the Gurdjieff dialogue, there's that kind of theory that there are almost like a quantified number of people who can reach awakening in terms of like the material of knowledge being accrued. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, because that's a weird idea. Gurdjieff was convinced that knowledge was a substance and that there was a finite amount of it. I find no evidence for this to be true, and I'm assuming that he was actually speaking in some sort of metaphor. But he was convinced that there was not enough to go around, and that most people would never get enough of it to begin their own transformation. I am of a different point of view. My take is that this, whatever it is, and I doubt that it is a substance, you cannot weigh it, it will not move a needle. It is not physical, and it is not energetic in any way that we understand, but it is a stuff. And I think that this stuff is virtually limitless. It's infinite. The problem is that not that there's not enough to go around, but that we are so clogged up with our own crap that we don't have enough room to let it in. And the first process of the path is to begin dumping that crap out of your system, which ain't easy. It's hard. Because the moment you start, the crap digs in its claws and wants to hang on. It wants to hold you where you are. It will frighten you. It will anger you. It will confuse you so that you will not let it go. But as you do, you will find that the whatever it is that is there to help people grow, there's always enough. That's my thought. Is that enough of an answer to your question?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I
Good.
am also more along that line, but I did want to have it kind of cleared up a bit, and that helped with that.
Yeah. I think that Gurdjieff actually was as well, but he needed to motivate his people. And he motivated them in certain ways. And one of them was, you know, y'all could die tomorrow. You don't have infinite time to do this work. If you are not working now, you may not have time to work tomorrow. And then he would say, you know, you only have a limited time to do the work, because as you get older and more sedimented, just as your body gets stiff, your soul gets stiff. And every year it is harder for you to reach down and touch your metaphorical toes. And there will come a time when you can no longer do that. And when that happens, you will not evolve. He would say things like that. And then he would say, you know, there's not enough energy to go around. If you don't get yours now, you won't get it. So I suspect, I have no evidence of this other than a lifelong study of the man, that he was using that as a device to motivate his students. And for some people, it will work. Some people it won't. Some people will throw up their hands and give up if you try and direct that to them. And he didn't want those kind of people. He wanted a very specific person.
Just following on from that a little bit, it's related to that theory, but doesn't necessarily have to include it. But in terms of the conscious circle of humanity seemingly releasing different teachings in epochs or epoch ending times when there's a lot of stuff going crazy.
Yes.
Can you talk about that as well, please?
Yeah. Here is my mythology. The conscious circle of humanity at all times contains the one teaching. The one teaching needs to be dressed in various different clothing to go to different lands and different times. You cannot take the one teaching to Baghdad dressed as a Viking. You cannot take the one teaching to the southwestern Pueblo tribes dressed as a Spaniard. Trust me, that would be a mistake. They did that once, it didn't work. So the one teaching is crafted to suit the people, the place, the time, and the circumstances. Those four things. And this is why the teaching transforms. A school will be created. Like right now, I'm creating a school. Kyle will inherit the school. It will not probably go, she may have a worthy student to follow her, but 3 generations down the line, the school will just be a form without substance. That is the nature of it. But the people who I raise, the people who she raises, the people who her Khalifas raise, will be doing something else. And so while there will be always certain people going to what I call the museum Sufis, this is not where the barakah is. Y'all know that word, barakah? Mm-hmm. Yes, the blessing, the energy. The barakah moves. The barakah is subtle and mobile and motal, and It swims around the world, and it doesn't care what kind of hat you're wearing. It doesn't care if you are a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh or a Jain or a shaman or anything. The barakah goes where there are awakened people. God, I feel like, hey, I'm doing one. I'm sermonizing. So, what does this really look like? One, it is not hierarchical and it is not dogmatic, nor is it sexist. From the beginning, there has been complete and utter equality between men and women in this path. And any path that does not show that is not this path. I don't care if some dude is claiming to be the Qutub al-Zaman and the highest saint of his time. If he has all of the women in another room wearing hijab and cooking for the men while they're doing all the spiritual stuff, he's full of shit. And you can quote me on that. There have been as many women teachers as there have been men teachers. One of the worst things that has happened in the last 2,000 years is that most of the women teachers have been edited out of history, which is one of the greatest shames of us as a species. But we do have some of the echoes of that. There's a reason in at least in Shivaism that Shakti is immanent. Shiva is the transcendent, Shakti is the immanent. Shakti is what brings the truth into the world, not Shiva. Shiva is busy doing his dance. And the truth only gets disseminated when Shakti interrogates Shiva and pulls the knowledge from him and then gives it to the world. This, I should tell you, is a heretical point of view and could get you burned at the stake in places. So you can blame me, but don't take it on yourself if you're around a bunch of staunch Hindus. So there is that non-hierarchical, non-rigid, non-dogmatic. It's a loose group of individuals. It is not like, we like to think of somewhere in the Hindu Kush mountains, there is a monastery, and in that monastery, the 9 unknown men sit, for those of you who read Jim Grimm as a child. And from their monastery, they are, manipulating the world to, become more enlightened. It ain't that. What it is a loose group of people who have stepped away from their fate and stepped into their destiny. And I've talked about that before, and I'll probably talk about it again because it's a subject that we need to come back to. Your fate is mechanical. Your fate will take you only one place, and that's to death. Your destiny is not mechanical. Your destiny is potential until you step away from your fate and you assume your destiny. And even then, you might go running back up to a certain point. So, another thing about this group, you can't find them. You could look for 100 years and you won't find them. They might find you, but you won't find them. No matter what you do, they could be living next door to you. I will tell you 2 stories. The first is how I found my first teacher. Some of you have heard this before, but I'm going to tell you again because I'm old and I get to repeat myself. So, when I was young, I decided that I must find the truth. And like every young person, I knew that the truth only existed far, far away from where I lived. So I packed up my bags and I took all of my money and I traveled. And I knew that the truth was somewhere with the Sufis. So I ended up first in Morocco. And I found lots of Sufis in Morocco, but they didn't have what I was looking for. And I was actually very unimpressed with them because all they wanted to do was trance dance, basically, and show off special powers like the ability to skewer themselves and, you know, put knives through their cheeks and all of this kind of stuff. So from Morocco, I went to Egypt. And Egypt was interesting. It was more interesting than Morocco. There were Sufis there. They liked spinning about furiously. And I still didn't find the person I was looking for. From there, I went to Jordan because, you know, Jordan is still a Hashemite kingdom, and I figured, well, maybe there's something there. And there were Sufis in Jordan, and they were very nice people. They were all very smart. I also stopped off in Lebanon, which I didn't meet very many Sufis in Lebanon, but I had some really good food. This was before the Civil War, when Beirut was known as the Paris of the Levant. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world to be. So Jordan was interesting. Petra is phenomenal, but couldn't find what I was looking for. Went up to Turkey. Turkey was also interesting. Turkey was more interesting, but all I could find were museum Sufis, when they would admit to being Sufis at all, because being a Sufi is still illegal in Turkey. There are actually laws against it. But you could watch the Mevlevis do their turn for a small fee. And you could listen to the sound of the flute, though you were not allowed to understand it. You could hear the words of Rumi, but you were not allowed to discuss them as if they meant anything. So getting fed up with that, you know, first to Istanbul and then Konya. From Konya, I went to Tehran. And from Tehran to Isfahan. And I found Sufis there. And they were more like what I was looking for, but they still weren't it. I hung out with them for quite a while, though. And yeah, I spent a lot of time in the khonegas there and helping out with you know, projects and chores and generally really enjoying my company. Then I ran out of money and I had to come home. And I had not found my teacher. I was very disappointed. So home at that time was near Santa Cruz, California. I lived up in the mountains, in the Redwoods, which is a great place to live, especially when you're young. And so I was back for about a week, and there's a little free newspaper that has been around in Santa Cruz since forever called The Good Times. And it has all of the stuff that's going on that week, and you know, the venues, who's playing what music where, and what's paying at the movie theaters, and little articles and restaurants and stuff. And there's always want ads in the back, you know, the classifieds. And I always loved reading the classifieds because sometimes they were hilariously funny. And there I was reading the classifieds when I saw there, at the bottom of the page in a little square, the words, Sufi teacher will be visiting Santa Cruz, call for appointment, and it gave a number. So I figured, that's interesting. I wonder who it is. And so I called. And I made arrangements to come and meet this guy. So here's the thing. I lived at 1747 Alba Road. And the place where the Sufi teacher was staying was 1000 Alba Road. which is to say, literally just down the mountain from me, about a quarter mile. So I go down there, and there's my teacher sitting there. It's like from that, I knew there was like no doubt. And when he spoke, he said what was in my heart. And so, boom, I took by right on the spot. Well, I actually had to go out and get some stuff because there was rituals around it. But still, I was out and back in a few hours, and instant Sufi. Less than a half mile from my house. Go figure. You can't find them. If they want, they will find you. Another thing is that they don't recruit. If you see any group that is proselytizing and saying, we have the way, that isn't these people. They do not want you to join. They will try and talk you out of joining. That was one of the interesting things, because when I was being interviewed by and interviewing my teacher, one of his senior people took me aside and he said, you know, this is a really hard path. There are a lot easier paths. If you have anything else that you could do, if you want to like be a yogi, if you want to become a Christian monastic, you should do that. I mean, he literally tried to talk me out of it. He was not selling nothing. And there was a test for admission. And the test is only one question, which is, are you awake? That's the only test you have to pass. There's a bunch of questions coming up here. Let me look through them real quick before I tell you more stuff. Is Baraka compatible with atheism? Sure, why not? Buddhists are atheists. Did you know that? Buddhists are basically atheists. They think that, yeah, they're gods, but the gods are illusionary. The gods are lost in illusion just like everybody else. It's one of my favorite things about Siddhartha's philosophy is that he didn't care about the gods. But atheism is just another religion. Okay. Before I go on, any other questions? Any answers? I have plenty of questions myself still. If you guys don't say something, I'm going to just tell you more stories, so speak up. Okay, one more story then. And this goes to the other side of this. When was it? It was about a year ago. I was going through the YouTubes and looking for interesting videos to watch. And because of the weirdness of my feed, a lot of strange stuff comes up. But you get a lot of interviews and talks and things like that. And there was this talk between, it was a guy I knew. I had known him for some years. He's a psychologist. I am not going to mention his name. Lived in the Bay Area for a long time. Probably still does. And he was being interviewed by some spiritual dude. And they were talking about looking for the Saramun, looking for the hidden masters. And my friend basically said, you know, I looked for them for years, and I know that he did. And I couldn't find them. Therefore, I've come to the conclusion that they don't exist. And I was just hit with this flash of, why in the world would they want you to find them? And if you knew the guy, you would know why I would ask that question. Because he was very, very full of himself. He actually once went to, he was the student of a Sufi teacher, and he went to the head Durga in Turkey and told everybody there that the teacher was not any good and that they should make him the teacher for this region. So maybe a few ego problems, but this is the question. Not, do these people exist or not? It's, why would they want to find you? Why would they want you? Are you somebody who would fit? Can you pass the test? And if you pass the test, they don't need to find you because you're already one of them, whether you know it or not. So that's my thoughts on the inner circle of humanity today. Hopefully that's useful. Maybe not. And so I will open the floor to any more questions or comments before we shut this down for the evening. Questions going once. Questions going twice. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to shut down the recording now, and hopefully I will see all of you or some of you or none of you or anybody next week. Take care.